Okay, well, welcome everybody to our monthly member open house. I'm Bill Kramer. Today's topic is insurance for photographers. Joining us will be our moderator, Aimee Baldridge, and our special guest, Rich Gunn. Aimee is a content developer, author, and editor specializing in imaging and technology. She was a longtime contributor to Photo District News. She is author of Organize Your Digital Life, published by National Geographic. And more recently, I'm pleased to say that she's been writing articles for Wonderful Machine. Rich Gunn is an entertainment and media insurance broker for TCP Company in Hermosa Beach, California. Rich has been working with photographers, agents, and production companies for over 10 years, and he's been helping Wonderful Machine with our insurance needs since 2014. If you are a Wonderful Machine photographer and you do need insurance, Rich has been kind enough to extend a 15% discount to Wonderful Machine member photographers. Also joining us are Wonderful Machine producers Craig Oppenheimer and Brian Sheffield. Craig has many years of experience producing photo shoots and thinking about all the things that can go wrong with them. And Brian spent many years working as a commercial photographer and experienced firsthand all the risks we'll be talking about today. So Brian will be keeping an eye on the chat. So please add your questions to the chat as we go along, and then we'll open up the conversation to everyone to jump in after Aimee and Richard, after the initial presentation is over. And so I'm going to bring up some notes because I'm going to improvise here a little bit. We'll give, if Aimee is able to get her Zoom working, I'll let her jump in. So bear with me for a moment. Okay, so, all righty. So Rich, welcome.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, photographers have probably a lot more exposure to risk than they realize. I was a commercial photographer for 25 years. And if I recall, I only had one claim when my van was broken into in a parking garage in Wilmington, Delaware, about 20 years ago, and all my equipment was stolen. But I never had any big, for example, liability issues. Right. I did have one situation where I moved I was working at a corporate headquarters near Philadelphia. I moved a glass coffee table to set up a picture, and unbeknownst to me, there was a mail robot, a robot that delivered the mail, an automated robot that was rolling around the office. And I had moved the coffee table into the path of the robot, and the robot didn't see my coffee table and broke the coffee table.
Oh,
maybe it was
that's
like
a first.
Maybe it was it was like one of those, what's the insurance company that does the commercials about the funny incidences?
Farmers. I think they all
Farmers Insurance. But yeah. But maybe it was $1,000 coffee table, and maybe my deductible was probably $1,000. So that wasn't really a claim. But if it had instead gone through a plate glass window, that could have been a $10,000 claim, right? Mm-hmm. So at any rate, I think you mentioned in our previous phone call, there are things that photographers are aware of. There are risks that photographers know about, and then there are risks that a photographer might not even realize that they are assuming when they accept a professional assignment.
Exactly.
So I just, what we've done, folks, is put together sort of a list of all the different types of insurance and risks that photographers need to be aware of. And we're just going to talk a little bit about like what sort of insurance covers those risks and what are reasonable insurance coverages for photographers to have. Mm-hmm. So first, the most common insurance that the photographers think about is photographic equipment insurance. So how should photographers, Rich, think about how much photographic equipment insurance to carry?
Well, generally, photographic equipment insurance, as far as the limit, you want to make sure that it's at least sufficient to cover the replacement value of your camera equipment, right? Typically, computer equipment is carved out separately. So we're looking at your cameras, your lenses, your lighting, your grip, if applicable, and that's going to be based on replacement value.
And do you normally expect photographers to maintain a list and to send that to you? And are you adjusting the premium each year as the value of their equipment grows or shrinks?
Yeah, at least with it does vary by carrier from one insurance company to the next as far as, do I need to carry an equipment list? Do I need to list all of my equipment on the schedule? But generally speaking, you'll want to maintain an equipment list. I found it to be advantageous in the end. It seems like a tedious task on the front end. What do you mean I need to get a list, prepared? At the end of the day, having a list that breaks out the make, the model, the value. What I hear most commonly is, gosh, I didn't know I had that much. So it's a good exercise, a good practice to get into as a business owner, and it'll ensure that if a loss occurs, damage, theft, what have you, that you're going to be reimbursed. That check will be cut in an amount that you expected. Everyone's on the same page.
And are you expecting that the photographers are also going to be able to provide you with backup, like receipts for purchasing this equipment, or are you just taking their word for it when they send you this list?
Yeah, sometimes the claims adjusters will request receipts, but that's one of the advantages of having the list, because that does act in most cases as your proof of purchase.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
and that is replacement value. So there's two valuations that everyone should be made aware of when you're speaking with your agent or you're investigating insurance. You want to make sure that you carry replacement value on the equipment. Replacement value versus actual cash value does not factor the depreciation. So when they reimburse you for that $10,000 camera that was stolen, you're hoping to get as close as to that $10,000 as possible. On replacement cost, that will most likely occur. Typically, it's based on market value. Actual cash value, they're going to deduct, in addition to the deductible, a percentage based on depreciation. So that's something to be aware of. Replacement value is key.
Okay, but some insurance carriers are going to offer replacement value, and for some you could just get actual value. Is that just an option that you choose?
Correct, but always replacement value. That's the best.
Okay.
And additionally, you want to make sure that you're on an inland marine coverage form and not business personal property.
Inland marine, not business person. Oh, so business personal property is stuff that doesn't leave your office.
That is correct.
Okay.
Property that lives at the address on file, and most everyone works from home. So I reviewed a policy it was a couple days ago, and the producer had $60,000 of camera equipment, production equipment. And I was reviewing his policy because he was currently insured with another broker, and it was all placed under business personal property. So unbeknownst to him, if he was out on location or anywhere outside of his home and there was damage or theft or any covered cause of loss, that claim would have been denied.
Got it. Okay. All right, great.
And inland marine has nothing to do with the ocean, by the way.
Yeah, so that's funny because I remember way back, getting the inland marine policy. What does that actually mean? I
break out the history books here. It's just a term that was formed, I think, in the 1800s, and it was when the ships would sail from whatever their routes were, but the insurance was set up for those vessels and the cargo that was within transporting from one coast to the next. And inland marine just, no one's come up with a better term. So
okay,
still lives on to this day.
All right, good to know.
Exciting stuff.
All right.
Real quick, Rich, while we're talking about replacement value, Scott Brower is asking if that replacement value would also include sales tax.
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, you want to make sure you include tax. Obviously, as I mentioned, that camera's stolen, you have a check in hand, you're going to go out and purchase another camera. Obviously, there's taxes involved there. So to avoid that surprise, make sure that you list or account for the sales tax when you're breaking out the values on the equipment list.
I think I see Amy.
Audio?
Amy, can you hear me?
I'm opening this so they're gonna see through.
All right, I'll keep going, Rich. Rich, I have another question related to the, sorry to belabor the point with the photographic equipment, but
Sure.
But you know, the most common thing I think about is somebody stealing stuff out of my car. But what happens if you drop a camera on the sidewalk? Like, at what point is there a point where the photographer's own negligence negates any insurance claim?
Outside of intentional damage, that would be a covered cause of loss. That would be deemed accidental damage.
Okay, so any kind of theft or damage, accidental damage is what that covers.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, if you're with an entertainment insurance agency, entertainment insurance broker,
yeah,
that's where you want to start. Whether that's through us or that's Athos Insurance or any number of entertainment insurance agencies, generally they're going to have the proper forms in place versus a John Doe insurance agency or, an agent that's, talking with restaurants and dry cleaners, and then he's speaking with you. That's where you really have to ask a lot of questions as far as, replacement value and what the losses are. So with our program with Great American, it was created for photographers, for creatives. So it includes replacement value, accidental damage, theft. Yep.
Right. So that brings up another interesting question for many people who might have homeowners insurance or renters insurance through State Farm or Nationwide. Are those sort of mainstream insurance companies going to be able to provide professional photographer insurance, or is it better to go to a specialist?
I'm sure everyone's had different conversations with their brokers, whether that's their homeowner's broker or whomever, and you'll get varying opinions on it. But my own is that a homeowner's policy and or a renter's insurance policy will not provide adequate coverage, certainly not out on location.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
but I mean,
maybe at home.
I mean, but if you've got an agent at State Farm, will they be able to add on coverage for professional photography, or are you risking having them not really know how to write those policies?
That's the general concern, is that I find in 10 years, 15 years as a broker, 10 years in entertainment, I get calls weekly from photographers and creatives alike. They're coming over looking at options. They're with State Farm, they're with Farmers, they're with more of a general business insurance agency. And I would say 80% of the time, those are the kind of problems I'll see, Bill, is that the gear is under business personal property. There's just a number of issues. So
got it.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
well,
if you have a good broker, let me just add one more thing. You can't beat a good broker, right? They have your back. You get along great with them. That's extremely valuable. So I don't want to just discard someone because they work for Farmers, but just be aware and ask lots of questions. And hopefully after today's call, you'll know what questions to ask.
All right, cool.
So just to add to that too, real quick, many years ago, I think it was 2003 or 2004, when I was just starting to be a professional photographer, had our house broken into in Los Angeles, and did not have photography insurance at the time, and got it soon after because State Farm denied basically any camera stuff that was over, like, consumer grade camera equipment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, likely because that was your profession, right?
Right.
Yeah, so if you were a hobbyist, they may be more inclined to insure that gear.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the big difference between commercial insurance and personal insurance. Your personal insurance will not extend to your business related activities.
Right. Yeah. So it was right after that I did get insurance through TCP.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Oh, good.
All right, well, let me reintroduce Aimee Baldridge. Aimee, can you hear me okay? So Aimee, yeah. Oh, I think I hear something. Aimee, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I can,
Okay.
yes.
Aimee, if you can hear me, let me know. Oh, okay, you can hear me, but I can't hear you. You're not on mute. So,
Hmm.
all right. Well, we'll keep going. Aimee, don't sweat it. We got it under control. I'll keep moving, and if you get it straightened out, just let us know. Okay, so
Is that something, can you hear
Oh,
There we
me?
go. We
that's
hear you
much
now.
better.
Okay.
Oh, much better.
I'm really sorry to everyone about this technical problem. I have switched machines, invaded my husband's chemistry classroom and taken over his Zoom machine, so.
All right, no problem. All right, well, Aimee, I've covered the photographic equipment and the business personal property, and so you can pick up after that if you'd like. So next, I guess, would be travel, medical. I'm doing the two that I'm going across the top of our list, each pair across the top. So if you've got the invitation handy, we can start in at travel, medical.
Okay, so you talked about the liability or?
So we talked about photographic equipment insurance and business personal property insurance.
Okay,
So the next on the list would be travel, medical, and international carnet.
right. So travel medical, this really just applies to people who are traveling internationally. And it's not specific to photographers, but if you are doing a job abroad, if you're shooting abroad, traveling abroad, and your medical insurance, your US medical insurance doesn't apply wherever you're traveling to, you can get travel medical insurance that will cover you wherever you're going. You can also get medical evacuation insurance. So, if you're shooting somewhere that's really far from medical facilities, or you don't have confidence in the medical facilities where you're going, a helicopter will fly in and medevac you out in case of an emergency. So those are things that you can get through travel medical insurance providers. You can also get general evacuation insurance if you are, for example, shooting in a conflict zone. You might want to get just general evacuation insurance so that you can leave quickly if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
And Rich, is that something that you guys cover?
We offer that through a separate insurance carrier, and they'll offer exactly what Aimee had alluded to, the evac, the kidnap and ransom, that's included as well, depending on where you're at in the world. Sleep a little bit better at night. Foreign, it just basically expands on the coverage territory. So your gear is covered, your liability is covered, auto, if you're hiring crew abroad. And generally those policies start at around $2,500 on the first plan. And every trip thereafter is underwritten on its own. They can range in premium between $400 and $1,200. And we can typically secure those within 2 to 3 days of your trip, but I would recommend calling as soon as possible.
And I believe you can do that on a per trip basis or a more, I don't know, an annual basis or something. Is that right?
Correct. I guess one of the important takeaways, just understand that your current insurance, let's assume everybody carries photography insurance through an entertainment insurance agency, okay? Your general liability, the standard territory is US and Canada. So US and Canada, not Mexico, just US and Canada. So if you're shooting in Paris, you want to make sure you call your broker to understand what's covered, what's not covered. Your equipment, our plane, our gear is worldwide. Your owned equipment, your rented equipment, generally that's worldwide. So even if you're traveling abroad, You may not need to go out and throw $1,000 at a foreign policy. It depends, but just have that awareness and call your broker. That's what they're there for, and ask those questions.
And I don't know if you wanted to touch on carnets for a moment. If you're traveling internationally with a lot of gear, you want to get an international carnet and have proof in that you that your gear is yours, that you're not importing and exporting.
Correct. Yeah, it's like a passport for your equipment, as I've been told by many cinematographers and photographers. And they're generally pretty inexpensive, and at times they will also include some protection if it's seized and or damaged or stolen. So you CARNET is the spelling, CARNET. Just do a search online and you'll get a few different options that'll pop up there. But that's strictly to show customs that you're bringing this gear with you. That is the intent of that carnet. And when you're returning it also. This belongs to me. I did not, purchase this in whichever country that you're in.
And Aimee, sticking with this travel a little bit, and not to get into COVID too much, but last month I was producing a shoot for a photographer in the Bahamas, and the Bahamas had a new policy that, along with their travel visa, they were including government appointed travel insurance, so that if someone was there and got COVID, they had the means to get the heck out of the country as soon as possible. Which I'm not sure what other countries are doing that right now, but I thought that was a really good thing, and it was all included in the visa payment.
That's very interesting. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Bahamas especially, they really don't want anyone there, and they want to make sure that if you're there and you get sick, that you can get the heck out as soon as possible.
Right. One thing I wanted to mention, if we can just, are we clear on travel medical and carnets? Forgot to mention something on the equipment that's very, very important, and that's the unattended vehicle theft exclusion, or unlocked vehicle exclusion. And what it is, I'll give you an example. If someone breaks into your car and there's no signs of forced entry, you leave the window down, or you thought you unlocked it, or even a Slim Jim to a vehicle. If there's no signs of forced entry, you go to file the claim will be denied if you have what's called an unattended vehicle theft exclusion, or unlocked vehicle exclusion. So take a look at your policy, call your broker, jot that down, and make sure you understand if that's included or not. Also, if you rent from rental houses, most of them will not rent to you if you have that exclusion in your policy. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We had a claim a couple weeks back from someone on the outside calling us, where his claim was denied through a particular insurance company that writes entertainment, and they had that clause in their policy, and he was not privy to that, and he was out of pocket $60,000. So now you know. Back to you, Aimee.
Okay, so did we want to talk about errors and omissions next?
Sure.
Okay, so so this is professional liability insurance, which is much more specific than general liability insurance. It's often called errors and omissions insurance, because that's what it covers. If you have a contract with your client to cover certain things, and they feel that you didn't cover what you were supposed to cover, or you did a poor job of it, there are all kinds of things that they could sue you for. So this is insurance to cover you in case of that type of lawsuit. So I don't know, Rich, if you want to get into the specifics of what can happen with an errors and omissions lawsuit.
Yes. I was just looking. Oh, okay. I have this 7-page document that was drafted by an attorney. I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but it was an actual suit where a errors and omissions / professional liability policy, if they had carried that insurance policy, it would have insured against these losses. And so the client, the photographer, was being the photographer was being sued by his client for the following. The work was inadequate. The photographer failed to provide an acceptable product. The branding was unimpressive. They spent too much time on the project. I mean, these are things you could say on any job. I mean, it took too long, or it was delayed, or we didn't like it. A client is dissatisfied. Anyone can sue you for anything, right? So they pursued legal action against the creative. I can't recall if it was a producer or a photographer for those items. Professional liability, I always, equate that to medical malpractice for a doctor. Same thing would apply for a photographer. So if you do not meet the terms of the agreement contractually, or they just were upset with the end result, they could pursue legal action against you. How do you insure against that? Professional liability. And errors and omissions insurance is typically combined within that. So not to confuse it, when you hear E&O, errors and omissions, and professional liability are typically offered as one and the same. And it also extends to intellectual property infringement, your copyright, trademark, licensing, a song that you didn't clear through the intellectual property holder. So any of those incidents or losses triggers litigation that's brought against you. Your E&O / professional liability policy will respond accordingly. And typically they insure you up to $1 million in net excess defense coverage. For photographers, you're looking at anywhere between $250 to $500 for the year for a $1 million limit.
And Rich, have you seen any cases go through? Like, have you seen any situations where somebody does have to fall back on that type of insurance? And I'm curious, what would trigger that?
We don't see too many, honestly. We actually have a separate errors and omissions department here because each and every policy that's constructed, we review their contracts, we review their operations, because especially you can't just pull any E&O policy off the shelf, Bill. It has to be written kind of custom spec to what the operations are. You're a photographer in digital tech, or you're a DP and stylist. It has to be included within the insuring agreement. So we've seen some copyright claims here and there, but not too many. Not too many.
Okay. One side note, I once was helping actually a wedding photographer with his contracts, and I noticed that he had a clause saying that in any event he will not be held liable for more than the value of the project. So if it was a $5,000 wedding, you're basically he was basically saying, if there's any problem for any reason, you can withhold payment, but you can't sue me for any more than that. I know you can't really talk about legal too much, but
I can touch on that.
But in your experience, for a commercial photographer, there's potentially more liability because if you're producing a shoot that somebody's counting on, more than their wedding, which is sort of a personal thing, they might actually, that client of yours might be suffering actual damages as a result of your inability to perform.
Sure.
So I wonder what you can tell me about, like, the difference between if you're a wedding photographer and your limit of can you impose upon your client a limit of liability, and can you likewise as a commercial photographer impose that limit of liability?
Certainly, you can construct an agreement, a contract, a service agreement. You'll want to run that by an attorney, of course, but contracts and agreements are critical to mitigate risk. Just as your insurance policy mitigates and manages that risk, your contract will accomplish equally as much. And I think that's one of the more common overlooked aspects in running your business is the importance of that contract, and including verbiage such as I'm only going to be held responsible for X amount, right? The budget is X and therefore I will only assume responsibility up to X. Indemnification agreements, indemnification clauses. I don't want to be responsible for a loss that occurred that wasn't due to my whatever I was there hired to do, correct? Uncle Johnny had too much to drink at the wedding and he injures himself and you're named in that suit, right? So you're going to be, I would recommend talking with an attorney, drafting maybe an overarching service agreement for all of your clients and including some of that verbiage there. Absolutely. It's a very effective way to mitigate that risk, Bill.
I thought it'd be a good opportunity to jump in here to talk about contracts. So, I mean, a lot of the names that I'm seeing here of all the photographers, most of us have worked together in some capacity, whether it's consulting to help you guys put together contracts for your jobs or us maybe hiring you for projects. So we see it from both ends. I see it from photographers asking me to help with their projects, and I see requests from agencies and brands hiring us as the production company. And I kind of see, three different kinds of projects regarding insurance. One is insurance isn't discussed up front. There are more important things to figure out. All right, what's it going to take to make this project happen? And we're not talking about it. Never comes up. Insurance never comes up. Other types of projects where at some point the agency or the brand says that, or maybe it's the equipment rental company says that you need to have a certain amount of insurance and you need to present a certificate of insurance to prove that you have some kind of coverage. And the third, more, I guess, elaborate way of going about it is when an agency, a big agency, is hiring us or a photographer and they are providing some kind of wrap-up insurance, and it's definitely part of the conversation. So we've seen kind of all spectrums of the conversation of insurance. And when it comes to contracts, I think it's really challenging to incorporate, to know in advance what the expectations are of you. It's one thing to maybe have a terms and conditions that say what you have, just so it's upfront and there's no questions asked. But we found a lot of times, especially working with large brands, and agencies, they are not going to sign our estimate. They're going to issue their own purchase order and ask us to sign that. And very often, and at that point, you've already gone through maybe a month of getting the project to that point where it's about to get signed off. Maybe you haven't even talked about insurance at that point. They send you the purchase order and it has 10 pages of fine print of all of these things that they are expecting you as the photographer or the production company to have. And many times we've been successful in redlining those contracts. And I see like longshoremen's insurance requirements, and we're like, none of this is applicable. And I say, hey, is it okay if we strike out some of the stuff? And sometimes it's totally fine. And sometimes it's a problem that puts a roadblock in the project as we're trying to get it off the ground. I think because we are, at least this wonderful machine in our consulting services, we're very buttoned up. We read all the contracts. I think a lot of photographers don't read the purchase orders, and they're just kind of signing away and hoping that nothing happens, and they don't even know that it includes clauses about insurance. So I think it's just really important to make sure that, as the photographers here listening, that you read those purchase orders and you know what you're agreeing to, and make sure that if there are terms in there that don't match your policy, typically what we're striking out are, if they say you need $2 million of general liability and you have $1 million of general liability, things like that are typically fine. But we've seen some very aggressive demands from clients. And unfortunately, it's at that moment when when it's like the project is finally happening, then you have to like stop, and the shoot's happening the next day, and like have a negotiation about insurance.
Oh,
so
sure.
Rick, I'm just wondering, like, what else can we be doing up front to say, as the production company or maybe photographers to put in their contracts what they have, maybe like a mini version of certificate of insurance to show like what's in their policy.
That's just the nature of the beast. You know, we get so many requests for insurance the day of, the day before, and that's just part of the business, right? What can be done? I think the question here is what can be done to ensure we're better prepared and not caught in these predicaments. A sample certificate, I think that's not a bad idea. I'm not in the trenches like you guys are, but a proof of insurance certificate to be proactive and here's what I carry.
Sure.
Doesn't come up very often.
And to come full circle, errors and omissions is definitely one that we see a lot of the requirements, and we've increased our policy over the years to make sure that we have it. So,
Right.
photographers listening, like in addition to just general liability, if you want to try to avoid those last minute scrambles, it's worth investing in the errors and omissions now, because we do see it in most purchase orders from the large agencies out there.
Yeah, I recall helping a client out in the past, and his client was requesting $5 million of errors and omissions insurance. So I called his client's insurance department, and we were able to negotiate that down, not because it was expensive for our insured, but because the job, based on the job, it just didn't make sense to carry that much insurance coverage, right? So it's always worth, to your point, Craig, a lot of times the insurance requirements will just be excessive. They'll be very aggressive, and don't feel that that's the final draft, because a lot of times it's just a template that's sent out. They, throw it up against the wall, see what sticks. Start off by sending them your insurance certificate and work your way back into it. That's one way to go about it.
But what are the key things that that clients are concerned about? Because they don't care about your equipment, of course. They care about property damage and bodily injury on the shoot, and they care about errors and omissions. So for Craig or Rich, is there any other sort of major type of risk that clients are concerned about?
I see general liability a lot, and errors and omissions, and workers' comp is a big one that they call out, especially when we're getting that wrap-up insurance. So I mentioned there are projects where sometimes an ad agency is providing most of the general insurance, but they still need proof that you, as the photographer or production company, separately have workers' comp coverage that they are not covering. We just had to send a certificate of insurance over today or yesterday for a project showing that. So those are the main categories that I typically see.
Okay, so workers' comp covers for someone getting injured while they're on the shoot?
Yeah, we'll open up. I think we should open up that one on a separate talking point.
Yeah.
But yeah, workers' compensation for injury in the workplace to crew, quote unquote, employees, quote unquote. And Craig, to piggyback on what you said there, also auto liability. I'm not sure if you mentioned that or not.
Right.
Hired and non-owned auto liability. These limits are typically $1 million or greater. General liability, auto liability, workers' compensation, and typically some form of E&O insurance. Those are the
right. And if it's not the agency or brand, if that's not part of the conversation, definitely equipment rental companies and studio rental companies will ask you for a certificate of insurance, even if that's not something you've discussed with your client or agency. So separately, you may need to negotiate something with your vendors that are providing you some services.
Do you find that you can contact your clients in advance and have that dialogue weeks in advance regarding insurance, so that you could build chargeback for insurance potentially and kind of forecast your expenses?
On most large productions, we're charging for insurance, and this is, I'm sure, maybe a question that would come up. We've found an industry standard is to charge 2% of the bottom line as a fee for insurance. That's one way of potentially calculating it. So keeping that in mind, it's a negotiating point. We always include a line for insurance, charging for it in some way, shape, or manner. But we've found, you know, when a client reaches out with a hot project and there are a trillion things that need to be figured out, insurance is pretty low in the totem pole of conversation points. It's unfortunately, it's just one of the things that, you know, of all the questions and that need to be answered and budgets that need to be figured out, the people that need to be hired and logistics that need to be sorted. The question of, do you have any insurance requirements oftentimes doesn't come up until they send you the purchase order and it's like, whoa, you need you need $10 million of general liability. This is our certificate of insurance. Like, who do we got to talk to in your accounting team to sort this out? But you know, it could become part of I guess, an earlier conversation if we wanted it to be. I think a lot of the art buyers and people that are hiring us and we're negotiating with, probably they're not the people that are dictating those things. To your point, they send out it's a template they send out on all the purchase orders. And there's a lot of stuff sometimes that's not agreeable. I think they don't know any better.
Sure.
And so sure, I suppose it would be great if we could have that conversation earlier on, but I think it's pretty low in the totem pole of what those people that are reaching out for estimates and bids and treatments want to talk about. And I think you just have to be careful on, you have to choose your battles wisely, I think, during the pre-production process to get a project off the ground, and let them know that you're going to be an easy person to work with, an easy production company or easy photographer. So if you come in hot talking about, you know, insurance, and that's like not what they want to talk about, you just got to be careful, I suppose.
It's a very good point. Ease of doing business. So you got to find a balance there.
To add to this conversation too, photographers, if there is some kind of specialized insurance need you'll need for a project, most of the times, like Greg was saying, it's a negotiation. You can put that into the estimate for the client. A number of years ago, I did a shoot for a giant cell phone company, and they needed, as I recall, it was like $20 million of errors and omissions insurance, which I, of course, didn't have.
How much? 20 million?
I think it was 20 million, as I recall.
Oh my goodness.
But we ended up getting a 6-month policy, I think, for $12,000, and you know, put that into the fees for the job, and only had to give 6 months policy because once the work was only going to be used for that long. Yeah. So yeah, all that stuff, like Craig was saying, is negotiable, and hopefully they're upfront about it. But when you get that PO, if there's any big, I hope you have that conversation.
Absolutely. Utilize your resources, so they can go. Your members can go to you for these contract reviews. Just so I have it right.
Yeah. So in 2 different ways. Sometimes photographers will come to us for consulting, and we'll help them put together estimates and projects, and then help them produce it. And other times, agencies and brands will come directly to us as Wonderful Machine as production company, and we then hire photographers and produce shoots.
Okay.
So we're constantly reviewing contracts for photographers, helping them create their own contracts, and generating contracts for productions that we're managing from start to finish as well.
Understood. Okay.
And I think just the big takeaway from any conversation is have a contract. You know, so many times photographers come to me and they're like, hey, this thing's happening, and how do I handle it? And I'm like, what did your contract say? And they said, oh, we never had anything in writing. And I'm like, well, you're probably screwed. But here's how to like have a good conversation with your client. So get as much as you possibly can in writing. You know, the more tighter of a box as you can put around a project on paper, the better. Because yeah, things happen, and you want to protect yourself.
Yep, absolutely. All very good points.
All right, well, yeah, go ahead, Amy.
We should move on to general liability then, since this is coming up in the discussion. Unless people had more to say about. Oh, okay. So general liability is something that is more has a much broader scope than the errors and omissions. So it covers things like property damage and injuries, but also things like libel and defamation, slander, lawsuits. all sorts of things that can go wrong on your set, whether it's in your studio or on location. And if you're going to shoot on location, you are most likely going to need some kind of general liability insurance in order to get permissions and permits and from wherever you're going to shoot. So you want to make sure that your the insurance that you have covers you in any location where you're going to shoot, whether it's in your own location or a remote location. And you may also need to provide if you're shooting at locations outside of your studio, you're probably going to need to provide certificates of insurance to the location manager or whoever you're dealing with in order to get permission to shoot at the location. So you want to make sure that your insurance provider can give that to you in a timely manner. So that is if you are shooting with a crew, if you're shooting anywhere where somebody can get injured or things can get broken, then that's something you're going to need. So Rich, do you want to talk about the details of that?
Yeah, just general liability, no matter what business you're running, whether you're baking bread or you're running a dry cleaner or whatever you're doing, $1 million of general liability, period, right? In this industry, it's an absolute necessity, as Aimee had mentioned, for a permit, a location, renting equipment, clients, vendors, everyone's requesting at least $1 million of general liability. I think we can all agree there. That's consistent, right? They're going to request one insurance coverage is general liability. And I would say half of our calls are prompted because they need to satisfy an insurance requirement. So general liability is very important from that perspective. You have to have it if you want to be successful in this line of work. It's also very important that your classification is accurately represents what you're doing as a creative, as a photographer, okay? You could line up 5 general liability policies up one against the other. They all have normally 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. So we would assume they're all the same. Well, that's false, because the coverage terms, the limits could be identical, but what's under the hood, right? What's covered, what's excluded. It's all based, a large part of it is based on the business classification. So if you look in your policy under business description, you should see photography services if you're a photographer. If you're a production company, you should see production company or something similar to that. So business description is also an important detail when you're looking to secure insurance, and specifically general liability insurance. So once you've secured a policy that represents who you are and what you're doing as a business, assuming that's photography, what is general liability accomplishing outside of, here you go, here's a certificate, additional insured certificate? It's insuring against third-party bodily injury during a shoot and the ensuing litigation, right? The athlete that's the subject of your photo shoot broke their finger. They're pursuing legal action against you. Or maybe they're suing the client you're named in that lawsuit, okay? That's where your general liability policy will respond. So we call that third-party bodily injury. Your assistant is injured. Well, they're likely going to fall under the state's definition of an employee, and that's workers' compensation. So that's an important distinction I just wanted to point out to everybody if you weren't already aware of it. Typically, your crew are going to be defined as employees, especially out here in California. And if it's a crew member that is injured, that's not general liability insurance. So if you only carry general liability and you're hiring crew, make sure you talk to your agent about, your broker about workers' compensation. So third-party bodily injury. And then secondly, third-party property damage. If there's property damage at a location, the flooring is damaged, the furniture within, that's called damage to rented premises. And that's normally offered anywhere between $300,000 and $1 million. There's a lot more to it than that, but I'm just kind of going through the bullet points here. So third-party bodily injury, third-party property damage.
And Rich, is that a real situation that came up, the athlete broken finger, or do you have any other sort of situations that you can share that you've seen yourself?
You know, we don't see too many general liability claims, to be honest with you. It's equipment, it's inland marine, auto, and workers' compensation. Those are the loss leaders when it comes to claims that are filed. You know, general liability is insurance is so important to carry, but we just don't, coincidentally, we don't see any claims that often, maybe once a year. And we have thousands of photographers and production companies that we insure. So, you know, we just don't see too many claims there. I can give you an example. I had a producer in New York. She had a contractor that she hired to come in and paint the wall. They were building a set. Crew member was painting the wall, and he fell back off the ladder onto his back. He ended up filing a workers' compensation claim through his employer, which was the contractor, the general contractor, right? He then turned around and filed the general liability claim against the production company. He was double dipping. So there's one example for you. And mind you, it was a very unique, maybe a bad example, to be honest with you, a very unique situation, because the contractor, he was a subcontract. They hired a general contractor who then hired the subcontractor, right? But takeaway here is that he pursued legal action against the production company for $1 million.
And
General liability claim paid out, but you know, that's honestly, that's one of the very few claims I've seen under general liability in 10 years.
And do the
personally.
And are you allowed to file a claim on multiple different ways like that?
In that circumstance, you can.
Okay.
When it comes, let's say I hire a photo assistant and they're legally defined as an employee and they injure themselves. Once they file that workers' compensation claim, they legally give up their right to pursue legal action against the employer as well. Okay. So just to make a distinction there, this painter was not legally defined as an employee because he was a subcontractor of the general contractor. Again, maybe not the best example to give everybody here. I don't want to confuse it. But in most states, these labor laws are very broad in scope. You know, you're paying them 1099, you're paying them however you're paying them. It's based on relationship between the two and the direction and control that you give. So they injure themselves, they're an employee. 9 times out of 10, they're going to file a workman's comp claim. And once they do, that's it. That's the exclusive remedy. There's no legal action that will ensue 6 months later within the statutory timeline within 2 years. Okay. But if they decide to not file the work comp claim because they lost a limb, let's say, and they feel, gosh, Bill, you really put me in a situation. I didn't want to do that. You made me do it. I'm going to sue you for everything I can imagine. Then they take that route. Okay. So it's one or the other. They file a work comp claim, medical expense reimbursement, A to Z, any and all expenses are reimbursed, or they pursue legal action against you. But either direction, that would fall under workers' compensation.
And does the and if you do have some sort of catastrophic incident like that, where somebody is genuinely really injured, and they do file a lawsuit, if you've got, let's say, $1 million in coverage and you get sued for $3 million,
right?
If the plaintiff is successful, are you individually going to have to come up with the other $2 million, or do the juries tend to look at how much the coverage is and limit the award to the coverage? Does the award have any relationship to the coverage?
I'm sure there's some correlation there, but I'm not personally privy to that. In my first year as an insurance broker, I came across a business who had a claim in the prior year for $6 million. I won't go into detail as to what that was, but he had a $1 million limit of liability and he had a $5 million umbrella. Right. So I'm under the assumption that that payout was in relation to the amount of insurance that he had. He had a lot of insurance, by the way. But if someone does pursue legal action for an amount that's more than what you're insured for, you would be responsible for the difference. And that's where a commercial umbrella would be important. We could touch on that later.
And
Rich, I have something to jump in here about. You touched on independent contractors and employees, and especially in California, I know a lot of productions now are using payroll companies to pay definitely talent and sometimes crew, and that's an evolving story and a whole other conversation of when you do and don't need to use a payroll processing company and I guess employee versus independent contractor. My understanding is when you work with a payroll processing company, workers' comp is mixed in with some of the fees that are taken out of what that person is being paid. Is that correct? And is that a policy that the payroll processing company has, that if a claim comes up, it would go through the payroll processing company as opposed to the production company?
That is correct. Yep. The payroll company has secured a workers' compensation policy, just as you would secure a workers' compensation policy, right? They've gone out and secured one. So anyone that is paid through that payroll company is an employee of that payroll company. They're the employer of record as it pertains to an injury.
I always thought that was kind of interesting though, but because does that policy not kick in until they are paid? Like, because the payroll processing company, at least from the production standpoint, they're not involved until kind of the end when people need to get paid. But as the production company, we're involved with hiring and making things happen. It seems weird to me that a payroll processing company would kind of be the ones where a claim would kick in when really their involvement with the project is simply paying people. Just kind of was always a strange thing in my mind.
Always with insurance, right? But I mean, as far as when I think if they're on the books and they're going to be paid whenever that might be. I think if it's formally on file with the payroll company, I think that's sufficient. But that's a good question. Right. That's never come up before. But they do establish that employer of record title as it pertains to injury. Also important is if they're not paid through the payroll company, right? You bring someone on who's a PA or lighting assistant and you're paying them as a 1099 for whatever reason, they would not be insured under the payroll company's workers' compensation insurance. And so there's a gap in coverage there. So that's something to be cognizant of. So it's important to understand that.
Right. And I'm just thinking from a contractual point of view, when a agency would hire us, if we're using if we're signing a contract that says we have certain, we happen to carry workers' comp, but let's say, we didn't, we would be agreeing to have workers' comp because we are hiring a payroll processing company that they have the workers' comp coverage. It just seems like a weird thing if we are agreeing to an agency's request to have something, but really we're hiring a third party that is carrying that as part of the payroll processing. Again, it's different because we do have workers' comp, but I'm just thinking if a photographer was ever in that position, it seems strange to agree to something that they don't necessarily have personally, but they are hiring a vendor that has that coverage because they're paying those people. It just seems like there's like a whole lot of gaps between like the company requiring the insurance and the company providing the insurance. If you're working with a payroll processing company, it just seems very confusing to me.
Yeah, it can be. And satisfying insurance requirements, going back to that, you want to contact your insurance broker, contact your rep, Wonderful Machine, because that could be case by case. But generally speaking, that's going to come up in one way, shape, or form workers' compensation. That's the bottom line. But you inject the payroll company into it, it can be a little bit confusing. But you're finding that to be more and more prevalent with the new labor laws in all of these states. And all of these freelancers are employees, right? And they need to be not only insured under workman's comp, but paid as an employee. We had I hope you're okay on time here, but just a quick point. We had a client who was sued by a crew member from a year prior to the shoot because he was paid as a 1099 and not as an employee. Right? So to my point, they need to be treated as an employee in both payment and insurance, which is workers' compensation. They pursued legal action against him due to being misclassified. Misclassification. You misclassified me as an independent contractor and not as an employee. So, I mean, he felt slighted enough to sue him, and the client. Client was named in that too. So just things to be aware of. And there's insurance for everything under the sun, right? You don't have to load up on insurance on all of these various topics, right? You drown in insurance payments, especially as we're all coming out of a down economy. But having the awareness and just understanding what your resources are and what you're covered for and not covered for is important here, right? And if you need to pull something off the shelf, like I need to add E&O, I know how much it is. I know how long it takes to implement. I need to add workers' compensation. So don't need to load up on everything right away, but secure the essentials, your general liability and your inland marine, and then you can scale up. That's kind of how we do things here. Someone needs something, they can call us up. We can add it within a couple of hours, and it works out really well that way. So it can get overwhelming going through all these various coverages. And do I need to buy all this right now?
Rich, I want to be able to get to some of these questions, and we're running a little over. So maybe we can just cover some of these remaining items briefly.
I'll give you the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah. So, and Amy, sorry to jump in, but for non-owned and hired auto liability, I don't know if we may have touched on that early on, but is that simply when you rent a car, you have insurance? Is that something that the photographer is going to go to you for, or is that something that you're just going to get through Avis?
Most of the yes, we offer hired and non-owned auto liability. It's $125 to $250 for the year. Okay. Most car rental agencies, most of the national car rental companies will offer both liability and physical damage. The boutique car rental companies, not so much. And those, additionally, those that do offer insurance, usually it's just a damage waiver and not the liability. So when you go into a car rental company and you don't rent very often, if they offer liability and physical damage and you maybe rent a vehicle once or twice a year, that's a great option to have. But know that if you do need to secure auto liability, hired, meaning rented, and non-owned auto, it's relatively inexpensive, $100 to $125 for photographers for the 12 months.
Okay.
Also, if you have people who are working for you, who are renting the vehicles themselves, but using it for work purposes, if you have a policy, you can then add coverage as an endorsement for those people. Is that correct?
As far as your crew members?
Yeah, if they're doing the rental, but they're using the vehicle for, in working for you.
Yeah, you're essentially the employer, and all of your crew are the employees. So they're extensions of your business. You wouldn't need to add any special endorsements. The hired and non-owned auto liability takes all of that into account. The non-owned portion, and I'll wrap this up on the auto, the non-owned auto is, just so you understand what that means, everybody, is if you have an assistant run an errand on your behalf, but in their own vehicle, in their personal vehicle, and there's an accident, any litigation that falls on your lap would be addressed by the non-owned auto liability. So that's what non-owned is for. It's for your crew members' personal vehicles, whereas the hired is for the rented group truck, passenger van, motorhome, private passenger vehicle. And that's that on auto.
All right, and then can you just briefly tell us about what wrap-up insurance means?
Yeah, Craig alluded to that. A lot of agencies will say that we would like you to use our insurance versus your own. General liability, equipment, auto, everything is going to be ran through the, call it the client's insurance. So they've gone out, like the payroll company's gone out to a work comp provider. This agency has gone out to an agency like an Aon or a Marsh who offers production insurance. So if I'm the photographer, I can't charge back for insurance generally, and any certificates that I need will be through this Aon or Marsh, this third party. So like a Nike or most of the Fortune 500 companies, many of them utilize this wrap-up insurance because it's a catch-all, very high limits. It's a very broad form, insuring everything except for workers' compensation. And that's going to be facilitated by a payroll company or through your insurance broker. But yeah, wrap-up insurance, the client's insurance provider offers everything under the sun, very, very high limits. So it's on them if a loss occurs, except for workers' compensation. So that's what wrap-up insurance is.
And so
And something that comes along with that, we just did this yesterday, is for the photographers that haven't experienced that, you'll get an email from that insurance company asking you to fill out a special coverage checklist. So they're basically saying, we are providing you with all this insurance. Please fill out this form to confirm that on your shoot, there's no pyrotechnics, or you're not using helicopters, and you're not going to be on top of a mountain, or you're not going to be underwater. You're not going to have any high-speed pursuits. Basically, they send you a form like that you have to check. I've never checked. Unfortunately, I'd like to have pyrotechnics in our shoots. That'd be cool. But I've never had to check yes for any of those boxes. But what comes along with that wrap-up insurance typically is a special coverage checklist that you as the photographer or producer have to fill out and return to them, typically with a certificate of insurance showing that you also have workers' comp. That's a very common thing that we've had to do.
Okay. Yeah, stunts, pyrotechnics, precision driving, drones. That was one of the questions that Sarah had posed. Most of these items are not just automatically included in your insurance policy. So just be aware of that. If it seems risky, talk to your insurance broker about that. There's several different options, whether it's a one-day policy or a carve out for the year. Like drone insurance, you can purchase that for the year. You can purchase it by the hour. You can purchase it for the day. But hazardous activities in general are excluded, whether that's a wrap-up policy, they need to be addressed, or your standard photo policy that you carry.
Great. All right, I think Aimee has some resources to share at the end, but Brian, do you want to sort of go through some of these questions in the chat for us?
Yeah, Rich, you touched on the Sarah question for a second there. Would we list drones under an equipment? And then I think that brings into the classification as well. Drones are used as, for still and also motion. But let's assume you're a still photographer and you own a drone. Should you list that on your equipment, or is that a separate policy?
I can speak for our insurance plan, Brian, that we can insure the drone on your inland marine, on your equipment list. So when you submit your equipment list and you're looking to insure a drone or a number of drones, we can accommodate you and insure the drone if it's stolen or damaged. We would just simply increase your deductible from 500 to 1,000 on all of your equipment. So that's unique to us. The drone liability is not covered. All right, so if the drone flies into someone's hand and their fingers are mangled, your general liability policy will not respond. So it does vary from carrier to carrier, from broker to broker. We have a separate drone insurance department here at TCP where they can set up a drone policy if you're licensed and You need to be licensed, and it's a significant part of your revenue stream, and you're looking to develop your drone services, I would investigate an annual policy. But to answer your question, we can insure the drone on itself, just property insurance at a higher deductible.
So Sarah, if you wanted to jump in as well, if that helps answer the question. I mean, so my take on that though is if you're a photographer using drones, sometimes maybe it's a $1,200 drone, maybe it's not
Right.
the investment to put that into your policy under equipment.
Gotcha. Thank you.
What do you think about that, Rich? I mean, if it's just going to raise your deductible and
Yeah, I agree. If it's like a Mavic $1,200
right.
drone, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Your camera equipment will be covered attached to the drone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's important to understand, but just not the drone itself, any drone accessories.
Cool. Quick question too, that everyone had, that Evan has was, where does TCP operate? He was asking if there's local resources for NYC photographers, or should he reach out to you guys?
Well, yeah, we're headquartered in Hermosa Beach, which is in LA, 10 minutes from the beach. But we do have some employees based on the East Coast as well, which is important if you need an early morning certificate.
Mm-hmm.
But we are based in Hermosa Beach. We have licensed in almost all states. We have a heavy concentration in California and New York, some of the major markets, Illinois, Washington. But yeah, I would say California and New York are some of our busier states.
Awesome. And then Scott Brower. Hey, Scott, if you can hear us, if you want to jump in. This is a interesting question that I think can
Yeah, I saw bulletproof vests. Let's get into it.
Oh, Scott says no audio right now. So Scott is asking if bulletproof vest is a requirement for his work, for him to be a photographer. Should he include that in his policy, bulletproof vest? And he's not saying that here, but I'm kind of guessing it's like, is that a big call out to an insurance carrier? Hey, I'm putting myself in this sketchy situation. What's my policy premium going to be?
I guess it depends on if it's incidental or if that's, I'm assuming Scott is going to be in these types of situations around the world on a consistent basis. So that's a big part of the underwriting, is if this is something that comes up periodically. I'm just reading his chat there, or continuously. But the something like that, transparency is the common thread there. We need to make sure that we understand every aspect when it comes to being in, you said not war there, but, you know, countries where there's rioting, civil commotion. There's a market for everything. We've insured photojournalists that are involved in shoots like that on a case-by-case basis. If it's something that takes place every month or every week, it's not something that we would have a market for.
Okay. So per the equipment needed for the shoot, which in this case, we're talking about a bulletproof vest. I don't even know how much a bulletproof vest costs, but would that be something that he should consider putting on a?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Does anyone know how much a bulletproof vest costs? I have no idea.
They're $137.
Nice.
We bought one yesterday.
It says 700 or so.
I have no idea.
We'll find a way to squeeze that into the policy somehow.
Yeah.
But worldwide coverage on the equipment. You know, is bulletproof vest considered camera equipment? Not really, but we insure camera bags, we insure Pelican cases. As long as it's your repertoire, part of your gear, we shouldn't have any problem insuring that as long as it's on the equipment list.
Very good. Yeah, that seems to be all the questions that I see in the chat. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to jump in.
I think it's just important maybe to say, fortunately, we've never had to make a claim with any wonderful machine production, which I think is a good thing. But generally, I mean, you can't, it's good to have these policies. It's good to check your contracts to know what you're agreeing to, but you can't control every situation. You can only control so much, you know, like that light stand might fall over, but it's in your control to hire someone that knows how to put sandbags on that light stand. So it's good to have these policies as much as you possibly can afford. It's good to charge your clients as much as you possibly can. But with everything, it's all a negotiation, I think, with your clients. And it's just about being careful. But these things do happen. Fortunately, they've not happened to us on our productions, but it scares the crap out of me to think about it, you know, going into these shoots.
Right.
But that's my job to worry about that, so other people don't have to, I suppose.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Well, that's great. I think we covered a good amount of this conversation. Amy, do you have other resources that you wanted to share?
Yeah, well, at the end of this article, I listed some different sources for insurance because it's pretty scalable. You know, you can get in touch directly with an insurance company like TCP that specializes in insurance for photographers. And you know, if you need general liability and equipment and all these things, you can also do very small scale things like if you just want to rent one piece of equipment through a peer-to-peer equipment rental website like ShareGrid or KitSplit, they do sort of piecemeal insurance. So say you want to try a new lens, camera, whatever, and go through one of those peer-to-peer sites, you'll buy the insurance with the rental, and that's a very like affordable way to cover that. If you join a professional organization, there are a number of them that offer insurance as a benefit of membership. So like APA, ASMP, PPA, these photographers associations offer insurance benefits. Also, organizations like the Freelancers Union and some other kinds of professional organizations might, depending on what your area of photography is, might offer discounted insurance that will apply to you. So those are all sources of insurance to look at. A general thing that I would say though is that the insurance you need is going to be specific to you, and so whatever source you use, whether you go to an insurance company or go through your association or some other provider type of provider, it's good to talk to somebody like Rich. Obviously, he knows a vast number of details that your typical person doesn't know, and that you don't even know to ask about. And everybody's situation is specific in terms of the gear they have, the people they work with, and where they work. So it's a really good idea to discuss that with someone like Rich, or someone who has expertise in insurance and can sort of customize a package to your needs, so that you're not overspending on your premiums, but you're covering all of your risks, and preparing yourself for situations where you might need to provide proof of insurance, like renting and shooting on location and that kind of thing.
Yeah, those are all great resources you have listed there on that newsletter. And I just want to point out, you call around to Hiscox or Insurion or any number of companies, always ask, will I be working with you moving forward? Because some of these companies, you call them and it's someone different every single time. And it's a little more challenging to build a relationship and get consistent information from that resource. So something to just be aware of.
That's good to think about, especially now, because we didn't really get into talking about COVID because it's really a can of worms. And I think people constantly have questions about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that makes it a good idea to have a contact, have somebody who has expertise that you can ask about your specific situation, because different policies cover things differently. The laws are constantly changing. The situation is constantly changing. So it's a good idea to have somebody that you can ask questions and make sure that you're covered as the situation develops.
Rich, can you just say a little bit of something about COVID?
Yeah.
Just because this is something that's on a lot of photographers' minds.
Absolutely. And I mean, generally speaking, there's no solution for COVID related incidents still. Outside of workers' compensation, your insurance policy will not respond when you file a claim for a COVID related incident. Again, workers' compensation is that one coverage. It does vary by state, but in most cases, that's your last line of defense. And again, going back to contracts, like the COVID addendums and the waivers, and that's all so critical. So going back to the contracts, they're so very important. But generally speaking, the insurance industry has not and likely will not offer insurance solutions. That's going to be offered on a federal level. The Pandemic Risk Insurance Program is being worked on and hopefully will be unveiled here soon. But much like after 9/11, there was the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, provide coverage for acts of terrorism because those losses are far too great for the private markets. So same thing for COVID. You know, it's the invisible enemy. It's impacting everybody, and there's no way for actuaries to get a firm grip on what kind of losses they can expect. So I can send you guys some links over to you to Bill and the team, and you can send those out to your members about the Pandemic Risk Insurance Act and some other important information. ASMP published some really helpful, their legal counsel published some really good resources there, which I saved. And I'll tell you right now, over the last, 12 months, COVID really started hitting in February. So we're getting there. We've had maybe one incident, one claim filed for COVID, which is unbelievable.
What were the circumstances?
It was a crew member that contracted COVID in California, and the production company filed a claim through us. And there's so many variables involved there, but in California, as I said, it does vary from state to state, but in California, the burden of proof falls back on the employer. In most cases, it falls back on the crew member. They have to prove that it was contracted during the shoot, which is almost impossible.
And so what were they claiming? What were they hoping to get out of the suit?
Medical expense. Well, it wasn't a suit. It was a workers' compensation claim, medical expense reimbursement. This individual was hospitalized. It was treated like an injury.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
It did not insure, which may also be on everyone's minds. What if my shoot is canceled? It's postponed. It's delayed. The policy does not insure against those types of losses where your loss of income, loss of revenue. I have to reshoot next month because someone contracted COVID and we have to close it down. Unfortunately, at this time, that's not insurable. So workers' compensation is pretty much it. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, that's terrific. All right, well, we're coming up on 3:30, so I think we'll wrap this up. But Rich, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. It was really a pleasure hearing from you. Aimee, thank you. Craig and Brian. For anybody who wants to get in touch with Rich, his email and website link are at the top of the chat. You can also find his information. We will make sure that his information is in the expert advice article. There's also some additional information that we'll be adding based on this conversation to the expert advice article. And thank you everyone for attending. Next month, we're going to be, Nadia and I are going to be doing a program on LinkedIn for photographers. So you'll be hearing from us about that. And as usual, if anybody wants to stick around and ask me anything, I'll be sticking around for a while if anybody has questions or anything you want to talk about at all. So again, Rich, thank you. Amy, Brian, Craig,
you.
thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
All right, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, everyone.
Got it. No problem. Thank you all. Have a nice afternoon.